What gives community soul is the ability to connect in more than one place. Sometimes by just interacting unexpectedly, being able to bump into people when you least expect it, but because you both care about a place and you frequent it, it becomes this natural thing. Without a plan, without a care, you're able to connect in more ways than one.
I'm John Lewis, and you're listening to 360 Degree City, a podcast where we talk to all kinds of folks that are making life in cities better. Our hope is at the end of each episode, you'll start to see your own city from a slightly different angle.
Hey there, this is Jean. I'm the producer of this podcast, and I'll be taking over from John for today's episode. Last weekend, 2 of us from the team went to Winnipeg for the National Canadian Institute of Planners Conference. In collaboration with the Manitoba Professional Planners Institute, this conference attracted urbanists from across the country. The conference covered many topics, from the importance of music venues.
What is the most innovative idea I've learned this week? Well, that music spaces, venues, recording studios, artist studios are a real good grassroots beginning to rejuvenation of an area that seems to lack direction.
And motels.
The one I just listened to was interesting about the motels and the conversion of old motels into transitionary housing for refugees.
To why storytelling is key for city building.
I really like the idea of the stories and listening to each other's stories. I think it's a way of starting a conversation by understanding where people are coming from.
We wanted to share snippets of stories about Canadian communities, so we went to the streets and conference halls to ask planners what challenges their communities are facing. We heard a variety of responses.
Entrepreneurialism. We actually have an abundance of it, but in the Nunavut, I believe there's a shortage of it in many communities.
The biggest challenge I see, at least in my communities, oftentimes there's very limited enforcement of bylaws, where the system itself is based on a complaint-based system, so which creates a very confrontational situation where you have to report issues that or lack of compliance with something to the city for it to be any action taken against said issue.
I think the biggest challenge that Winnipeg is facing right now is probably changing people's perceptions. I'm someone who lives in downtown Winnipeg, and I think when I tell people that I live downtown, I sort of get these strange reactions like, oh, it's so unsafe. Like, are you nervous getting home late at night? And, you know what, I think there has been a big shift in a lot of the smaller community organizations are making a big difference, and they're having people out on the streets. They're increasing public art, lighting, different events that are going on downtown. So I think that's really making a big difference. And so switching people's perceptions and actually getting more people to be downtown, live downtown, is going to make a big difference for our city.
Housing affordability is the biggest issue. I'm really concerned about the lack of connectivity between our rural communities. Greyhound Bus has just announced closure in Western Canada, and that just gives less opportunity and choices for people to travel between communities.
Our biggest challenge is to how we can attract more economic developments.
In rural communities in Manitoba, a number of them are in decline. How to revive them and to bring new life to the communities is an important issue.
Strong, honorable leadership.
Working towards changing perceptions of local residents with respect to increased density and height.
I think it was more the idea of change that we had to work through as opposed to the actual change itself. There's a bit of a stigma that we're a suburban sprawl, vehicle-oriented oil city, and while that may have been true, I don't think it's true going forward. So how do we talk about that change and make that change happen is something that I think we need to work through.
I think for sure it would be the fact that traditionally Moncton has been more of a rural kind of not growing city, like most maritime, especially New Brunswick communities, whereas right now we're seeing it's the only growing community in New Brunswick, and it's kind kind of learning how to change people's mentalities from a more rural, small town to a more urban environment that wants to attract growth and wants to grow into something maybe equally as wonderful, but different.
I think a lot of people assume the biggest challenge for Winnipeg is its climate and how cold it gets in the winter, and I feel like that puts a very big barrier on where people want to walk, and as far as getting people outside and moving. But to me personally, I think that should be seen as more of an opportunity rather than a challenge.
I would say the biggest challenge facing my community, being Ottawa, is to really carve out its own identity beyond just being the nation's capital.
Breaking down the silos.
Very incremental change can be very difficult.
We recognize the many challenges facing communities across the nation, but we didn't want to end the conversation there. The theme of the conference was soul, grit, and authenticity. Paul Kennedy, host of the CBC Radio Show Ideas, said in his keynote at the conference that soul is what you find when you don't know what you're looking for. You'll find it when you listen. So we thought we'd listen to others and ask, what gives your community soul?
I would have to say, because we're on Indigenous land, of course, Treaty 1, Homeland and Métis Nation, like that, we have to start from there.
Now, what gives the community soul is generally the people and how you relate with the people.
So I believe what gives our community soul is the togetherness, just the way the community has been designed. There's lots of parks and trails and opportunities for people to get together.
Well, the neighbors, the neighborhood, right? It's all about a neighborhood. So, because the neighborhoods are, like, especially Winnipeg. Winnipeg's got such deep-rooted neighborhoods that it's really a part of it.
What gives community soul is the ability to connect in more than one place. Sometimes by just interacting unexpectedly, being able to bump into people when you least expect it, but because you both care about a place and you frequent it, it becomes this natural thing. Without a plan, without a care, you're able to connect in more ways than one. In Kingston, for me, that can happen in the public market on a Saturday. For me, public libraries have played such an important role for anybody to have access to. So you see folks from all walks of life in that space, and it becomes when I went to Halifax recently, I saw that this is a space that they created for people to just be able to show up at any time, and public libraries are becoming more and more like that. But growing up, for me, the public library was a really important place.
Nelson, BC. What gives my community soul is its urbanism in a remote mountain town setting, but I love its walkability.
When I hear the word soul in the context of like the urban environment, a good synonym for me is grit. I guess I appreciate cities that have an underground kind of not so pretty side to them, and I like it when a city doesn't try to cover that up. I like it when the city encourages you to see those areas.
As a Winnipegger, I think in general our isolation from other big urban centers has forced us to kind of think of our own solutions and create our own local culture. And I'm not saying it's like for better or for worse. I'm just saying it's unique to the type of people that we have here.
So I would say for Ottawa, one of the things that gives it soul is the fact that it's consistently compared to Montreal and Toronto. And so that those two places being like cultural epicenters of Canada, I would say that, it forces Ottawa to kind of try harder to define itself and to carve out its own little identity. And I would say that in the past 10 years, it has done a really good job of kind of defining what the soul of the city is. And I think it's partly because of the constant comparison to these other, metropolises, I guess, in Canada that have really led to that.
I think the Maritimes are super unique in that the people who have stayed there, who haven't left, love where they live and can't imagine living anywhere else, whether it be fresh seafood or access to nature, access to the beach. People just love where they are. The sort of social aspect of it, I think, is probably what gives it the most soul. People are at the pub, people are in the streets, everyone knows everybody. We just bought a house and we're planning a block party for 400 people.
Having really great places where you can connect with people, that gives soul too.
It depends on your local CBC radio station. That
That's how I got connected to cities when I first came as an immigrant back in the last century. So CBC is the root to the soul.
The local businesses and the local art scenes with the monthly art crawls and local business coming together to support one another.
A lively music and entertainment sector that is often unknown by those who don't live there.
Shared spaces. People can just kind of collide with each other, like the street corners, the cafes, the front yards. Just provides opportunity for people to bump into each other and create connections and know what each other are up to.
Steinbach, Manitoba. What gives us soul is our history. And I know you get this a lot, but our people. I guess by perpetuating traditions and history, but also embracing change and diversity.
The city has taken on truth and reconciliation, so there's a lot of emphasis on rebuilding and continuing to increase those relationships with Indigenous.
Probably the sort of the bilingual history, French and English.
The connection to nature, I think that really feeds the soul for sure. But I think in a way then that also gives soul.
One of the things I love is there's old trails here, right? Like the Notre Dame Trail, the Portage Trail, and they go on an angle. We end up with streets that engineers would never allow anymore.
I'm from London, Ontario, and the thing that gives our community soul is the Thames River. The Thames River is a designated heritage river in the City of London. And the London Community Foundation, in cooperation with the City of London, is looking at ways to enhance public access and public use of our Thames River. It's been the soul of our city since it was founded in 1792, and we look forward to making it even a more attractive and inviting place.
Gatineau Park?
Placemaking along our river edges, that gives Calgary soul.
And Kempenfelt Bay gives Barrie its soul. It's a wonderful bay and the city wraps around it.
Donc, ce que j'apprécie particulièrement de la ville de Magog, c'est le fait de pouvoir... c'est l'âme, dans le fond, de Magog, c'est l'accès au lac, l'accès à la montagne, le fait que je puisse marcher, me rendre à la montagne, me baigner dans le lac, en profiter, le voir, et puis c'est ce qui, je pense, crée l'âme de cette ville.
Edmonton gets its soul from its natural environment and its commitment to sustaining local businesses.
It's most definitely Winnipeg's wicked food scene because we have so many amazing local and talented chefs.
Whether dealing with growth or decline or anything in between, cities from coast to coast to coast face challenges when preparing and planning for change. But when a city encourages social interactions and strong feelings of connection, communities can cultivate soul, which can lead to solidarity and strength. As Jane Jacobs once said, there's no logic that can be superimposed on the city. People make it, and it is to them, not buildings, that we must fit our plans. We had a great time with the fellow CIP delegates this past weekend. Big thanks to Sheena and CIP for setting us up at the conference. If you want to learn more about the conference, the Canadian Institute of Planners, or other related topics, check out our show notes.
360 Degree City is created by the team at Intelligent Futures. To learn more about the work we do, you can go to intelligentfutures.ca. The music in this episode and in all our episodes is by Sound of Picture. If you like the podcast, please share it with someone that might be interested in seeing their own city from a different angle. We would love it if you subscribed and reviewed the podcast and would love to hear your feedback. If you have any suggestions for future guests or topics that you'd like us to cover, get in touch with us on our website or any of our social accounts. I'm John Lewis. Thanks for stopping by.